I've been eating, sleeping, and breathing the American Civil War these days, so back in June, when Donald Trump sent Marines out to Los Angeles to quell unrest there, I grabbed a bucket of popcorn and a Lincoln biography. You probably saw that headline and thought, just another Tuesday for the Trumpster, but for me, that was another chapter in a 260-year-old discussion about what the government can and cannot do. You see, much of the reason why the Civil War broke out at all was fierce disagreement about whether or not the government had any power over states. Did the government have supreme power, some power, or no power at all? And then when an emergency arises, can the president do whatever it takes to quell that emergency, even if some of those actions appear unconstitutional? Governor Newsom of California, when Trump sent the troops out in June, just like the southern states before him, cited the 10th Amendment when he protested Trump's actions. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution says this: "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." Trump, in typical Trump fashion, retorted by saying, "If we had not done so, Los Angeles would have been completely obliterated." I think you and I can figure out whether or not Trump was right on that, but the question remains, when can the executive branch of government do things? The short answer, whenever it wants. The U.S. government, especially the executive branch, can do just about anything it wants in times of crisis. All the executive has to do is declare that a crisis exists. When interviewed about his decision to send Marines, Trump told reporters, "I wouldn't call it quite an insurrection, but it could have led to an insurrection." Could have led to an insurrection is doing an incredible amount of work in that sentence. It's also intentional. By calling the protests in LA a potential insurrection, Trump was giving himself room to cite the 1807 Insurrection Act, which gives the executive branch the power to deploy troops to quell insurrections. Now here's where things come full circle. Attorney General Edward Bates cited the exact same 1807 Insurrection Act when he was defending Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus. He wrote this: "One striking example of this is the Act of Congress on March 3, 1807, which empowered the president without the intervention of any court to use the marshal, and if he be insufficient, to use the army, summarily to expel intruders and squatters upon the public lands, and that power has been frequently exercised without, as far as I know, a question of its legality." He would continue saying, "The executive powers are granted generally and without specification. The powers not executive are granted specially, and for purposes obvious in the context of the Constitution." Coming to the point, the executive branch especially, and the federal government generally, can do whatever they want so long as the definitions of crisis or insurrection or war are met. And those definitions for what those things mean specifically are pretty hazy. I waited to talk about the LA riots because the outcome was far more interesting to me than the event itself. Would Governor Newsom's frustrations actually lead to any significant change? Was Trump doing anything especially tyrannical? As seems to be the case with executive actions in the past few months, it seems to me that broadly the actual powers the executive possesses is fundamentally misunderstood. We're having arguments on Twitter in the internet sphere about what should be, but we're not actually talking about what is. And yet here's the thing. We are all protesting unilateral power on No King's Day when we're all gathering in crowds to protest the fact that we don't want a king. And some people are citing Red Caesarism as the thing that we need to defend against because it's the ultimate terror, and autocracy is lambasted from sea to shining sea. It's exactly the kind of thing that the Founding Fathers warned against. Yale professor Bruce Ackerman puts it this way, quote, "The greatest threat to the constitutional order is the normalization of emergency powers by presidents acting unilaterally." End quote. Let's call this situation the presidential power paradox. It goes like this. American presidents aren't kings, except when they need to be. Let's go back to 1803. Thomas Jefferson bought 828,000 square miles of land from Napoleon so that Napoleon could keep an army in the field in Europe. The issue was that Congress only set aside $10 million for the deal, but Jefferson purchased the new land for $15 million. If you're keeping tabs on things the way Jefferson's political opponents did at the time, you'd probably say something like, "Hey dude, you're not supposed to do that." And while Jefferson was largely a proponent of strict adherence to the Constitution, he wasn't about to give up the deal of a lifetime because of semantics. He made the deal, and then he said this afterward. It is the case of a guardian investing the money of his ward in purchasing an important adjacent territory and saying to him when of age, "I did this for your good." In 1810, 7 years later, Jefferson wrote a letter to John Colvin, where he outlined his view about the powers of the executive and when also it behooves the executive to use them. The question you propose, whether circumstances do not sometimes occur which make it a duty in officers of high trust to assume authorities beyond the law, is easy of solution in principle but sometimes embarrassing in practice. A strict observance of the written laws is doubtless one of the high duties of a good citizen, but is not the highest. The laws of necessity, of self-preservation, of saving our country when it is in danger are of higher obligation. Thus, the paradox. A president shouldn't exercise his power unless the laws of necessity demand that he do so. And if the president decides the laws of necessity demand that those powers be taken up, there's 123 of them sitting there waiting for him to use them. You might be thinking to yourself, this sounds like king stuff, the stuff that we were protesting in the streets just a couple weeks ago. The president can do pretty much whatever they want, except when they do, people are claiming they're violating the Constitution. Now you understand the paradox.